I've heard several pros say that when it comes to painting around trim, masking tape is a waste of time, and that once you get good with a brush, cutting your edges by hand without masking tape is faster. However, I've tried painting around trim by hand several times and I always end up frustrated. My lines are never perfectly straight and I'm pretty sure that it's slower. Now, I'm always interested in finding ways to save time on painting because painting is not my favorite thing to do. So I finally decided to put it to the test to see which one is faster, cutting lines by hand or using masking tape. Here's what I found out. I just finished installing baseboards in this office, and the last step is to paint. And since I had two walls that were exactly the same length, about 12 feet long, I figured this was the perfect time to do a side-by-side comparison to see which one is actually faster. On this wall, I'm painting it by hand with no masking tape. But to make sure it was a fair comparison, I did a bit of practice first. First, I watched all the YouTube videos I could find from pro painters to learn their tips. Then I practiced on another wall for a while so I could get my processes dialed in to make sure I was doing everything right. And here, I'm following all the best tips. I'm holding the brush like a pencil with a loose hand. I'm starting away from the trim and working my way toward it so I don't end up with globs of paint on the baseboards. I'm going in both directions since the wall is textured. I'm twisting my brush slightly as I go. I'm using a stiff, high-quality Purdy brush, and I'm tapping the paintbrush so my paintbrush doesn't drip. Another tip I learned was to wrap a wet rag around a putty knife to wipe off the paint drips. So I'm doing that right here. And as you can see, this is pretty uncomfortable. I'm glad I only have to paint a small area. I couldn't imagine doing this on an entire house. This first wall took me 20 minutes and 30 seconds to complete 2 coats, not including the drying time in between coats. And the finish is pretty good. You can see a little bit of waviness in the line if you get up close. Now let's see a similar wall, but this time using masking tape. So on this wall, I'm masking it off first using some frog tape. After applying the tape, I make sure to run my fingers along the edges while pressing firmly so that the paint doesn't bleed through the edges. I want all the edges of the tape to be securely fastened to the baseboard. Now, applying the tape definitely takes a bit of time and it is an additional step. So I'm curious to see if it'll be faster and if the quality difference is worth it. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I can paint from a more comfortable position. Additionally, I don't have to focus on my painting technique. The only thing I'm focusing on is not allowing the paint to pool up on top of the tape because that makes it more likely that the paint will bleed and I won't have a crisp line. I'm applying 2 coats of paint to both walls, although it may seem like only one since I've cut out the time in between and this is sped up. The second wall took me 9 minutes and 49 seconds to apply the tape, paint 2 coats of paint, and then remove the tape. And as you can see, the finish is pretty good. All right, so what's the conclusion? Well, using masking tape was way faster. In fact, it was twice as fast. It took less than 10 minutes to apply the tape, paint 2 coats, and then remove the tape, where it took over 20 minutes to paint without masking tape. Now, of course, that doesn't include the time in between coats. Okay, I cut that time out because that's irrelevant. That's going to be the same regardless of which process I use. Now, despite having an extra step, it was still faster to use masking tape. Not only that, but the quality of my paint job was better. As you can see here, the line is straighter and it took less effort to get that way. It was also more comfortable and pretty much better in every single way other than the fact that I had to buy the tape. So the bottom line, always mask off your baseboards and trim when painting. It's faster, better, and easier. The only place I think it's worth cutting edges by hand without tape is along the ceiling, since it's impossible to tape because of the texture unless you're using caulking and all these extra steps that aren't worth it. Cutting a line along a ceiling is actually pretty easy once you get good with a brush. I'm gonna admit that. Now, I know there's a lot of pro painters out there that are going to tell me that the reason it took longer is because I'm not very good at painting and that they can do an entire room in 10 minutes, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but as a pro handyman, I'm pretty sure I've painted more than 90% of the people watching this video. I hope this video saves you some time. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I'm Dan Perry, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.